So, good afternoon to everyone joining us today, including our panelists and all our listeners online. I'm joined by my co-host, Zubair, in this series of In Conversations that's a follow-up to some of the earlier conversations Zubair and I have been having on what's likely to be an incredible game-changing journey on responsible, sustainable and ethical business.
Jazakallah Firoz. Yes, as you said, we're hosting this thought leadership series that engages entrepreneurs, investors, and policymakers on the same platform in a peer-to-peer setting to discuss thought-provoking themes for the new wave of entrepreneurs, services, and products that are shaping the global, ethical, responsible, and halal economy.
So this series has been dubbed Reflections, and it's the world's first online-offline entrepreneurship hub, where our panelists will share their insights and expertise.
And Firoz, it's also an opportunity to answer all of those questions that people are wanting to be answered on the real value of being responsible, ethical, and sustainable, as well as the thematic discussions often missed on these circuits. So we'll be talking about impact, the UN's SDGs, of course, access to funding, and women economic empowerment, inclusion, wider diversity, and of course, with that, sustainability.
And then all of these conversations culminate in a plenary of intellect, expertise and talent in December at the Excel Centre in London at the Halal Economy Conference, where we're bringing people together to widen the discussion.
And this is the 6th webinar in our series, and today is all about travel and what's shaping the next decade.
Okay, so let's get started then. We already have a big list of those questions, but our listeners can use the Q&A tabs to ask questions, which will come through to myself and Zubair. To which panelist question is addressed to.
So today we have champions who've navigated this journey themselves. All the bios are in the LinkedIn hyperlinks that we've already shared online. Today we're talking all things travel. We'll be throwing in need-to-know questions to our panel of experts. We'll learn about how they got started on their responsible journey, what motivates them, and how they're navigating the space in today's environment. And also what they believe needs to be done by policymakers and consumers alike to motivate innovations, startups, and create a more enabling environment.
So we'll be asking our panelists to share their insights as the global change makers, sharing their journeys, describing how they became empowered to adopt business strategy to key developments, improving lives, and we'll also discuss their motivations in engaging with environmental, social, and governance issues in core business. And we'll ask them how trends in climate change and gender equality are informing business decisions, as well as other developments that are affecting the integration of the 2030 agenda into corporate decision-making action. So a warm welcome to all of our panelists. We have Kazi.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Wa alaikum assalam. So we've got Kazi, Rahman, Soumaya, Hamdi, Jehanzeb, Atif bin Arif, Syed, Adnan, and Nabeel, Shariff, who I think is here, has made it fantastic, brilliant.
Finally made it, yes. How are you doing, guys?
So look, we both want to welcome you personally to our In Conversation series, and of course being part of the wider picture as we reshape the ethical and halal economy narrative.
Okay, so let's get into it. So sit back, relax, as well as wearing multiple hats today, investor, entrepreneur, someone on the journey. I'm going to ask you to cast your mind right back to where it started. So I'm going to start off with the first question. It's a simple one just to ease everyone in and just get you into the flow, I think. So how are your companies and your services in terms of solutions, creating impact? I'm going to reverse engineer it. I'm going to ask this one to Atif first. So how is your company and how are your services creating impact?
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So my name is Atif bin Arif. I am one of the 3 co-founders of Ghumo.pk, which is essentially a two-sided marketplace that provides accommodation within Pakistan, which is alternative accommodation to the conventional expensive hotels or the substandard service. So as far as impact is concerned, the one thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to connect livelihood of people together. So what's important there is when there is a chain of monetary transaction, or you can say affiliate transaction that's connected with people, it's able to, sorry, I think there's some disturbance. If we can have everyone just mute on their end, I would appreciate that, please. Thank you. So, so what we wanted to do was create that sort of impact, where people are able to earn an extra income and create a livelihood cycle for themselves. Not only by doing it.
Sorry, Atif, we're losing sound. Could you maybe speak into the mic a bit closer?
Sorry, can you hear me now? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so as far as impact is concerned with Ghumo.pk, what we wanted to do was we wanted to ensure that people's livelihoods are connected with each other. So what we do is, in order for them, we've provided a two-sided marketplace and a technological platform whereby they can earn extra income, and any traveler that's traveling across the country is able to digitize their entire travel procedure through a very web-friendly and easy platform, and save money. So in that way, what happens is, the impact that we're able to make is not only people are earning livelihood from their homes, but then they're recruiting a lot of other people in order to facilitate the kind of business that they're able to run on a regular basis. So there's a lot of people that are now doing property management through our platform. Not only are they just, investing in one individual property, but they've got multiple properties. Then what's also happening, we've seen in the last couple of months, is there's a lot of recruitment of different social classes in order to facilitate the management of these properties. And that's great, because not only does it introduce people to technology, not only does it introduce people to innovation, but it also creates, it sort of eliminates barriers of different social classes, which has been fantastic for us, especially here in Pakistan.
Great. That's fantastic insight. I'm going to come back with some questions to you later, Atif. Nabeel, same question to you. Could you just share, what is your company doing to create impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of you might already come across Serendipity Tailormade, which we started nearly 10 years ago now, really moving along with the halal travel or the halal friendly sector. It didn't really exist back then, as many of us are aware. For us, our aim was always to encourage Muslims to travel outside of their comfort zone. So rather than traveling to the likes of, just Dubai or to Morocco, enabling them to travel across the world, but maintaining their faith at the same time. So for us, it was very much about cultural interaction as we began. And, we started off with 10 destinations worldwide. We're now up to 42 destinations worldwide, as far as Vietnam, all the way through to South America. So it just means that, from an impact perspective, we've been able to provide Muslim travelers with the ability to not only expand their horizons, but also from a reverse side, be able to introduce those regions to Muslim travelers. And from an economic perspective, that also has been very fruitful for the likes of DMCs, for hoteliers, and from a social and environmental impact too. Fast forwarding to 6 months ago, we launched a new brand called Halal, which is the first dynamic booking platform aimed squarely at Muslim travelers. We'd like to think that we're getting towards the Expedia for Muslims. Inshallah, that would be the case. Again, looking at the way that has an impact on a day-to-day basis, and for Muslim travelers is a very big part of where we're going, but also being able to provide local economies with an additional market for them to take advantage of.
Awesome. So, if I may, just follow up on this. I've noticed that all of you operating businesses with positive outcome-based approaches for everyone in society, and also wanting to address the problems of the world. Now, what's been your motivator and why is that important to all of you? And maybe we can kick off with Soumaya first, then Atif, Kazi, and then Nabeel. Over to you.
Sure. So I ran a company called Halal Travel Guide, and it didn't start out necessarily as a company. We started it out as a media project. And the idea was to encourage Muslims to seek the less traveled path, but also to help them empower their identity. So just to give you a bit of context, I come from a generation where we've grown up squarely in the light of the events of 9/11 and everything pretty much that's happened after that. So growing up in an environment where you're not really able to be proud of your Muslim identity or explore your Muslim heritage leads to a lot of questions. And we set this up really so that we could make it more accessible for Muslims to explore those things. So for example, last year we carried out our first Experience Bosnia trip. And the idea is that we bring Muslims together from all over the country. They don't know each other. It's a great chance to meet new people and make new connections. And then we take them through Bosnia with locals. And it's about building communities and crossing bridges in a way that is also sustainable and beneficial to the local community. So we'll only work with the locals. We, for example, will have lunch with a local Bosnian family in the countryside who are not necessarily that well off and would otherwise not benefit from standard tourism. So it's kind of a double, hitting two birds with one stone. It's making it possible for Muslims to reach out and rediscover where they come from and where they're going, but also in a way that is sustainable for the local communities.
Fantastic. And can we move over to maybe Atif and then Kazi?
Okay, so as far as one of our main
question?
motivators behind impact investment was simply coming from Pakistan. You know, there's a lot of opportunities. It's a land of opportunities, but at the same time, I think those opportunities are available for a very handful of people, simply because of, I would say, exposure or knowledge being transformed. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a company that is able to resonate the one inherent trait that Pakistanis have, which is the hospitality element, and allow them to create an impact within their social circle and then have greater impact through a connecting channel or through a chain reaction. And I think that was the main motivator behind what we wanted to do, was create a product that is something that's inherent, that's something that resonates with each and every Pakistani, irrespective of their ethnic or cultural background. And they're able to connect to it, and they are able to exhibit it in a natural element, and somehow connect, connect different people and create a bigger impact and a larger impact on a grander scale.
Great, thanks. And Kazi, over to you, and then Nabeel on the same question. You need to unmute.
Yep, there we go. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. I guess when we started Sunnah Mosque back in 2009, we're celebrating our 10th year anniversary this November. One of the key mission was to, I suppose, have a mainstream presence in Britain. Obviously, we started off very small with a humble investment of £600. We've grown organically, so we're very much Sharia compliant, not only our product itself, but our whole structure in terms of how we do things. So we don't take any interest-based loans. In fact, we don't take any loans. We don't have any investors. We don't take even credit cards or even overdraft facilities, all the way to banking instruments. So it's a very much, our principles are very, very stringent, and that comes from our whole family background. And obviously on top of all these self-imposed, I would say, challenges, we've had a vision to create a brand that speaks to the mainstream audience. Not only does that help, of course, advance our kind of objectives in terms of monetary objectives, but also it gives a platform for other I would say ethnic or Muslim communities to look up to and say, look, here's we've got this brand here, who are present in mainstream locations. And I guess another one would be the whole charitable aspect. So one of the things that we do is we donate quite a substantial figure every month to charitable causes, and that is from top line. And of course, the other objective that we always had was to create a family-friendly environment for not just Muslims that work within our company, but non-Muslims alike. So I guess these were the core, I would say, objectives and ambitions that we've had, and I think we have been able to impact in some way. Of course, we have a long way to go, but the journey is just beginning, I suppose.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And then Nabeel, over to you just very quickly. What's
Sure.
motivator for you?
Sure. I mean, I'll cover off a couple of points quite quickly. First of all, similar to as what Kazi was mentioning, giving back as we always have from the very beginning is a really important part of what we do. The Serendipity Foundation, you can have a look at, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can have a look at some of the projects that we work with from the very start. Most recently, though, at the end of the day, travel is one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions at the moment, and it's very topical. It's a really big part of what the narrative is and how it's being driven. And for us, we want to be able to provide as much negation of that impact going forward, because at the end of the day, it's all well and good to say that we're going to travel and we're going to have all these amazing experiences, but at the same time, how long are these experiences going to be around for? And for how many generations will they be there and available for? So recently, we are still the only halal-friendly travel company to be featured on responsibletravel.com and responsiblevacations.com in the US, where what we do is we look at the product that we have, not only from an environmental impact perspective, but also from a social, from a local economy perspective. And everything that we do is really driven down to the element that if we can reward somebody for traveling by train rather than air, we would like to do that. If we can reward somebody for using local guides rather than imported guides, or purchasing local product rather than imported product, that's only going to benefit the local economy. So for us, we have different tiers of levels of products that we have, and internally we rate those based on social, economic, and development goals that we have within the business.
Okay, so my question is one that came in online. It's for Soumaya and Jehanzeb. So as I mentioned, we have a number of participants listening in who are on the startup journey. They're thinking about starting their businesses in this space, or they're policymakers who are listening in to see how they can be thinking differently. So for those startups and policymakers that are trying to make sense of this whole ethical, responsible, sustainable, and halal travel industry, can you kind of tell them what it is really, and does it actually make any difference? So maybe Soumaya first, and then Jehanzeb.
There we go. The consumer desires are very different. So if we look at the travel market in general, it's mostly about getaways. It's about having a good time, having a break, package holidays, these kinds of things. Halal travel is different in that traditionally, it's certainly in the last 10 years, it's been driven mostly by needs, not even wants, but needs. So for example, the availability of halal food, availability of prayer facilities, and then availability of family-friendly activities. So these are the foundations to the halal travel market. Now we are stepping into a new stage of halal travel. And this is a bit more where the kind of ethical, sustainable elements come in. because a lot of places, and we're talking about both Muslim and non-Muslim destinations, have invested very heavily in providing the foundations that we've just talked about of halal food and prayer facilities. So even places as far-flung as South Korea and Japan, they are pretty much very well equipped to host Muslim tourists. This means the market is more saturated, there's a lot of competition, and consumers are able to be a bit more picky. So we've had a rise now in services for women, predominantly hijab-friendly facilities. So if you see, for example, in Antalya in Turkey, you've got ladies-only beaches, ladies-only pools, ladies-only resorts. And these are things that were unheard of 10 years ago. Certainly when I was traveling as a child to Turkey, you wouldn't even dream of such services. The next stage now actually is more about ethical travel, sustainable travel, and immersive experiences. So going abroad, for example, going to Uzbekistan, which has recently opened up to tourists and is actually developing its halal travel economy, going there and experiencing authentic Uzbekistan, the heritage. And what does this mean? Really what it comes down to is making connections with the stories in Uzbekistan, for example, the stories of Al-Biruni, and how this comes all the way back to developing a stronger identity as a Muslim and being able to be proud and more knowledgeable about it.
Okay, that's actually very useful insight. Jehanzeb, same question to you. So for the startups and policymakers trying to navigate this space, and obviously you come from a slightly different perspective, but the whole ethical, sustainable narrative, what do you think that they're missing out on? What can we share with them?
So, you know, I think living in Pakistan, we're lucky that almost everything that we do in terms of life or just travel specifically is already halal friendly, because the entire economy, the entire lifestyle, everything, like Soumaya mentioned, you know, women's only pools, women's only public spaces, women's only access to many things, hijab friendly environments. It's something that Pakistan already has. Now, I think that the problem that we mainly face is developmental infrastructure. So when we talk about having an existing environment which is conducive to halal tourism, we then lack the infrastructural support to facilitate larger numbers of maybe Muslims from different countries who may want to come and see Pakistan the way we would like them to. So when we talk about tourism, you have the north, you have the south, you have the beaches, you have the mountains, you have everything to see. And when we talk about immersive experiences, it's something that we, with the work that we do with Super Savari Express, has always been about. It's been about getting onto the streets, meeting the locals, learning the history, learning the local cuisine, the food. It's all been about doing it as a local would. And the fact that we already have an environment where the entire situation is halal friendly has been a massive plus. It's just that I feel that it's not as exploited within Pakistan as it can and should be, simply because of the maybe lack of awareness of the halal travel market being something that is a separate entity in itself, and the economy being an entity in itself, different from the rest of the travelers that come through. And from the perspective of, I would say, a lack in many ways of infrastructure and promotion of Pakistan and its spaces as a destination, specifically catering to halal needs, because that's something that's second nature to pretty much every public and private establishment here. It's just about ensuring that people who would want something like this know that they can get it over here.
Great. Well, listen, thank you all for sharing that. And I've got to say, I'm very impressed with your openness and your honesty and your straightforwardness. All of you get the big picture opportunities in halal and ethical travel space. To understand this emerging sector, and do you think they understand the opportunity that's available? And perhaps I can maybe bring Capt. Syed into the conversation over here to start off with, and then we'll throw it open to a few more people.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So, in my opinion, I think they do not understand. Coming from an American perspective right now, the halal tourism, it's growing, but it hasn't taken off like it has in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere. So I think as of right now in America, they really do not understand. And there's a lot more work, such as webinars like these, information's coming out, technical data is providing to industry leaders that will help them understand that there is a demand and that it can impact their bottom line. So right now, I don't think
enough's been done there. Yeah, absolutely. And Kazi, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think the mainstream are actually looking at this space and trying to kind of come into the space, or do you think no, they still don't get it?
And here you go. I think mainstream are quite aware of, you know, what's happening within the halal space. That's whether that is in fashion, whether that is in confectionery. You know, come Eid time, you'll see people like Body Shop, you know, Monsoon, Accessorize, you know, some other mainstream brands. They are kind of joining the bandwagon in terms of, you know, capitalizing on the whole Muslim market or the halal economy. So I think the mainstream market is watching it very carefully in terms of, you know, what's going on. You can take, say, Nando's, for example. You know, I think majority of the restaurants are halal approved. So I think it's a very interesting space. It's a very interesting time. And I think they are taking notice of it.
It's interesting, Kazi, you mentioned about half a dozen brands there as well. So my next question's going to build on what Firoz was talking about and some of the answers you've already given. So do you guys believe that there needs to be new strategies to meet the challenges and complexities of this growing ethically minded market? So we've touched upon climate, for example, and some of the other challenges. And from your own experiences, what does data tell us from your experiences? So I think if we start with Nabeel first, then Soumaya, then Atif. So I'm going to rephrase the question. Do you believe there's a need for new strategies to meet the challenges and complexities of this growing ethically minded economy? Nabeel, to you first.
I sit on both sides of the fence here. I'm just going to sort of reflect on what Kazi just mentioned about and the previous question about mainstream and how that's embraced. I actually think the travel industry is probably one of the most open at the moment to halal-friendly travel and ethical travel. If you look at the way that the travel industry has its contour and its journey right now is actually quite dicey. You know, Thomas Cook going under 2 weeks ago was a huge impact on the industry. And, you know, you've got hotels in Tunisia, in Egypt, etc., and the Dominican Republic, all relying heavily on rooms that they're not going to have filled anymore. So I think over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, they've been very aware that the fact that what they used to refer to as niche markets are actually no longer niche markets. They're literally changes in consumer behavior. And I think that notion is becoming more and more apparent. So if you take, for example, the vegan revolution, for example, over the last couple of years, I mean, every hotel I go into now will have a vegan option, and it's very well marketed. I've just come back from Canada, and being able to have, I was staying at a Westin, and they had halal food as an option, which 3 years ago I don't think they would have. I think the options are the key here, and noticing that niche markets are no longer niche markets. Ethical markets are actually the way that most consumers want to purchase. Specifically Muslim travelers and Muslim consumers, I think will really pave the way to how the next 5 years will play out.
Okay. Soumaya, same question for you.
It really depends on the regions that we're talking about. So if we're looking, and I think Captain Syed referred to this earlier, if we're looking at the Western markets, so the UK, the States, Europe, we are still very much, we're very young in terms of, particularly in halal travel. It's a very young market. It's still very much underexplored. It's not that competitive. Whereas if we're looking over at the Indonesian and Malaysian markets, for example, you know, they're about 10 years in advance, ahead of us, and they're already looking at things, in strategies and ways to make it more efficient. For example, we're looking at apps. If you've heard of Have Halal Will Travel over in Singapore, they've created an app to make it easier for Muslims to make informed travel decisions. And it's being able to provide information in the most efficient way that will allow and enable Muslims to make more informed decisions. And this is what will kind of prop up this notion of being able to travel ethically and sustainably. Because if you're in the UK, it's very difficult for you to be able to know, for example, in Uzbekistan or in Bosnia, which hotel is family run, where to put your money, how to make sure that the money that you're spending goes towards supporting the locals as opposed to supporting, you know, big brands. And it's about creating this connectivity, and those links are still very, very tenuous. And this is where a lot of the work that we do comes in, which is where we make that connection and we build that bridge between locals over here and locals over there, and thereby creating a network that is sustainable and that is ethical and that supports the locals and enables people to make informed decisions about their purchase options.
So thank you for that, Soumaya. Atif, I want to build on that question slightly, but I want to rephrase it, if I may. So you talked about Pakistan perspective and how your company is creating impact from creating revenue opportunities. But given the challenges in the country with what's happening on climate, and a country that's affected probably as one of the most countries affected by climate, how do you see from your experiences then the need for new strategies to deal with this ethically minded generation? And that kind of builds on what Jehanzeb was saying about the opportunities that Pakistan presents. So just to get a little bit of context around that as well.
So I think just to add on to what Soumaya had mentioned, see, with the times changing, I think things are very dynamic. Things are very fast paced with technology as well. I think a lot of the current trend in travel is experiential based. So irrespective of where you're coming from, you know, whether it's the West, whether it's the East, I think with technology, everyone is sort of, you know, sitting at an equilibrium where things become available as far as information is concerned. So I generally see the trend towards travel moving more towards an experiential based travel. And then with the Generation Z coming into the picture, we see more of a shared economy space where people are okay with not having their own vehicles, or people are okay with not having their own accommodations, but being actually in spaces where they can share those spaces or share those assets, and by virtue of that have other experiences. So as far as what we intend to do is, there's a lot of education that needs to go into it, from a climate perspective, from a literacy perspective. You know, we have I'm just saying this from a personal company's perspective right now. What we've individually done is, for all of Ghumo's mezbans, which are the hosts, we've sent out manuals which teach them basic education of hospitality, as far as, you know, as far as is concerned, as far as electricity saving is concerned, as far as making sure that wherever the guests are, or within the toilet, you know, what are some, what to do. So I think the important thing is that you have to localize the strategies moving forward. That's going to be very, very important. It can't just be a one generic strategy that sort of fits all. Yeah, that's my input on that.
Second, I hope you can still hear me. Yep, you're all back again. Okay, so look, everyone now is in the digital economy space, right? So travel, tourism these days, decisions are really made kind of using smartphones, new technology, innovation, payment methods, and all of this, in terms of embracing e-commerce, digital commercialization, obviously is the difference between being successful or not successful. But I want to pick up on something that was just mentioned earlier by both Soumaya actually and yourself as well. Is Gen Z reshaping this economy? So how travel and tourism? Soumaya on this one. I know you've been doing some research on this, right?
Oh, all right. Can you hear me? Okay, so I mean, I think it's fair to say, and I'm not biased just because I am from Generation Z, but I think it's fair to say that Generation Z are absolutely crucial to the way that the halal travel market in particular is being shaped, because we've got a very unique set of dynamics. We have a generation who are very well educated. We've got doctors, we've got lawyers, we've got teachers. We've got a generation who have good spending capacity. They're quite affluent. They have the money to go on 2-3 trips a year. We've got a generation who are not necessarily as connected as their parents were to back home. I know certainly for a lot of us and for a lot of our parents, going on holiday was going back home, kind of putting together the money for the year and going back home and spending the summer there. This is no longer the case. So we've got a generation of very curious and very socially and economically empowered people who want to be able to access the same facilities that they have seen their peers accessing, their non-Muslim peers accessing, and why not? And this is where the market is being driven by these desires. So no longer is it enough to provide halal food and prayer facilities. We've got the need now for authentic experiences, and this was touched upon earlier, the idea that you can have an experiential travel experience, being able to immerse yourself in the local culture, in the local stories, in the heritage. So for example, the stories of Mansa Musa in Mali or Askia of the Songhai, and these are all figures that are also very empowering, because we have an issue where there is a bit of an identity crisis amongst Generation Z. We kind of live on 2 different platforms. We've got where we come from, but it's where do we go? How do we go forward and marry the identity that we've been brought up with the society in which we live? And I think that's fair to say, whether you've grown up here in the UK or in Indonesia, this is a common theme. And being able to draw on empowering stories from Muslim heritage in particular is a way to open up and strengthen Muslim identities. And by doing that through travel, it's a very sustainable way of building upon the market and providing the services that Generation Z are in need of.
Thanks, Soumaya. That's really interesting, and I just want to kind of ask very quickly, Nabeel, what are your thoughts about Gen Z? Are you seeing them shaping the next decade, and what are the choices that they're making in terms of travel? And after you, just very quickly over to Atif as well, just from a different perspective in Pakistan. What are you seeing over there? So over to you, Nabeel.
Yeah, I mean, millennials and Gen Z, both of those have shaped a lot of the way that travel is in the direction that travel is going, and has been going for the last decade. I would say, personally, I think Gen Z don't have the disposable income as millennials do. From our research, we found that generally those that are looking to spend on an annual trip or 2 or 3 times a year trip tend to be those that were born between sort of 1980 all the way through to sort of 92, 94. However, that doesn't mean that the Gen Z isn't important, because at the end of the day, they're still aspiring to be travelers that will, in the future, have the opportunity to do that. With regards to the heritage tours and with regards to specialized tours, I think it's an important element of it. I just want to lay down a bit of reality from our perspective, is that we offer lots of different types of travel, whether it's soft adventure, whether it's discovering Islamic heritage, whether it's meeting local communities. The truth is that Muslims just want to travel like everybody else. Right now they do want a beach holiday. They do want to do what other people are doing. They want to go to Costa Rica and see the wildlife of Borneo, for example. They're really looking for ways that they can have a very similar experience to their peers. And it is very much peer-to-peer marketing. It's very much led by inspiration they see on social media. It's very much led by what Peter says in the office. I think that reality has to be met sometimes, especially when you're looking at critical mass. For us, there is definitely an importance to be laid at the idea of heritage travel, and I think the elements of what us as Muslims have provided to traveling the world over millennia, I think is a really important factor to bring into here, but it's not the critical mass, unfortunately, and that's the reality of it. And I think that has to be sort of addressed at some point now or some point in the future to really show that the halal travel market, the Muslim travel market that I prefer to sort of refer to it as, has the potential to go where it needs to be.
Thanks, Nabeel.
Just to add on to what Nabeel was saying over there, I think the great thing about Z is the fact that, can you guys all hear me? Yeah, just to add on to that was the fact that Generation Z is very active on social media. And currently with the times that we're in, that has a great impact. So in that sense, I think it's fantastic because they're able to reach out to audiences which conventional media might not have been able to sort of transform or reach out to. So A, they get the numbers, they get the volumes as far as information is concerned. And B, I think from a Muslim Ummah's perspective, when Muslim travelers are traveling the world and they're going to the same spaces that other ethnicities or other cultures and religions are going to, I think that has a very, very positive impact on Muslims generally, as a large scale ethnicity and religion to be followed, that we're not limited to geography, topography, religions, or spaces, whereas there's Muslims that are traveling around the world, there are Muslims that are hosting around the world, and they are having the same immersive, localized experiences in travel as other religions or ethnicities are doing as well. And I think, again, the fact that you have either a hijabi traveler or a gentleman who has a beard is able to show the same experiences on a grand scheme is fantastic, is a fantastic opportunity for the halal economy space.
Okay, so moving on to some other questions that have come in online. So this is specifically around halal, and this one, Captain Syed, is for you, and then Kazi, given your co-founder of an airline. So we've seen halal travel companies blossom across the world. All of you are part of that over the recent years. Do you think then it's no coincidence that businesses like these have blossomed and bloomed, given a rise or raised awareness about Islamophobia? Captain Syed, I'm keen to take your thoughts, given your background and sitting in the States.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting topic, and although I would say yes, it has, but in reality, it really hasn't. Impacted because of Islamophobia. I think, the Muslim community here is changing and evolving and learning, but, we are way far behind from the North American or USA perspective with regards to that. The other thing I would say is, I hope that it will not, we will not, it will not impact because of Islamophobia. I think it should do it because of the needs and desire for Muslim community, for us to actually impact the community and ensure that their demands are being met. So that's just, that's what I would say. But no, in my opinion, I not here, at least in USA.
Okay, and Kazi, given that you're running an airline, do you think that your business has come around and that businesses like yours because of the raised awareness of Islamophobia, or was it just right place, right time, and as Adnan says, a growing trend towards meeting consumer demand?
I mean, our kind of motivation before we started was, not only that, obviously we're quite passionate about what we do, and but I guess the underlying reason was the whole emerging economy aspect, the N11 aspect, and obviously, as you are aware through media, our initial objective and ambition was to fly long haul from the UK to the likes of Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and some of the African regions. However, obviously, given the fact that we're going through a very, very, very uncertain time, turbulent time in Europe, from an economical point of view, we have decided to kind of scale down our whole operation right to bare minimum, and obviously with a focus on technology. So obviously, we've kind of shifted away from commercial aviation right into luxury private aviation markets. And I guess the springboard or the launch pad for me to get going would be the Muslim travelers, the ethnic travelers, the millennials, Generation Z. These are the kind of customers that we are kind of hopefully, we're relying on quite actively to get our business going. And that's, I guess it was same with Sunamas. When we started Sunamas, our first core customer base was, Muslims, Indians, Pakistani, Bangladeshis. But now that obviously we're present in major shopping centers, this whole kind of split has we can see a very strong split between ethnic or Muslim or young customers and non-Muslims and non-Asian customer base. And I guess to summarize, I would say the confidence and the fact that we're still going is the fact that we can see there is a huge trillion-dollar industry rising, particularly in travel. So obviously we're starting within Europe. We want to cater to Muslim community, and not just Muslim community, anyone that wants to fly in style. But I guess there will be this halal touch to it, whether it's non-alcoholic beverages or whether it's halal financing. There will be definitely, a halal element to it.
Great. So, and I think that loops back to some of the comments that the other panelists have been making, that it's very much consumer driven, not through fear of not being able to access traditional mainstream airlines. So just quickly building on that, I've got a question for both Nabeel and Jehanzeb, and just very short answers. Based on what Kazi's just said, do you then think that traditional companies can shift change as well into this growing economy of this new generation of ethically minded or halal minded or Muslim centric traveler? Do you think your mainstream companies can just make that transition very easily to cater for those? Nabeel first.
Sorry, I'll try to just reply. The line got cut off a little bit there, but you're referring to mainstream companies moving into the halal economy is basically what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's already evident that they are. If you look at, let's take a couple of examples. You've got modest fashion, for example, where Nike have come out with the Nike hijab, which has just changed and revolutionized, the way that female Muslim sportswomen play their sport, and it's been accepted from a regulation perspective. Within the travel industry, I think it's been happening for a while now. I think the key here is that whether they want to make it known. So many of the hotels that we work with, especially amongst the larger chains, procure halal meat as standard. So from a supply chain perspective, it's pretty much the same as many other parts of the industry. What it comes down to is whether they feel comfortable enough to be portraying themselves as being welcoming to Muslims, and how that portrays their brand and that brand identity that they have. So I think it's less about the logistics of it. I think it comes down to not only the perception of them having it available, but also the commercial viability. Because at the end of the day, a business will always look out for how viable or how commercially beneficial a change in approach would be. So our experience and our approach to all of this, whenever we speak to a new chain or a new set of hotels, is really about how it can benefit them from a commercial perspective, but also how we can get the right message to the right audience.
Okay, thank you. And then Jehanzeb, same question too, but I'll just reframe it. So obviously you run a travel tour company, and as you mentioned, you already have facilities where ladies would sit separately to men. Do you then think that mainstream companies, whether they be in Pakistan as your competitors or rivals, or competitors internationally, can make the same kind of changes? Can they adopt the way you're running your business? Do you think it's as easy as just doing that, as Nabeel has mentioned?
Well, I mean, I'd like to add on to what Nabeel said, because I think that, like he mentioned, when you mention it to a third party, it's the commercial viability that you have to sell to them. So when we talk about the commercial viability of halal travel, Pakistan already has an existing environment where it can flourish. It's just about how far you want to go to make that part of your brand identity, part of the facilities that you would give to people. And I think in Pakistan, it's not really an issue, because in Pakistan, it's just about who is willing to actually be quick enough or be the first mover in facilitating this overtly, because it's second nature to how businesses operate here. So when you overtly sell the fact that this is something that you specially take care of, it could definitely increase the otherwise non-visiting halal travelers who would now visit and use your service for some, when they might not have done that previously, and they might have gone to XYZ company or XYZ country. And when you talk about competitors being able to adapt, like I said, adaptability in the context of maybe Pakistan specifically, from a halal perspective, would not be the biggest challenge a business would face. It would probably be which business is quick enough to move in on something like this and present that forward to a global market that may normally not see Pakistan's companies or its facilities in that specific context.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned. It's not about sitting people separately. It's taking care of people and being mindful of their beliefs and their value system. And I think that's something that I'm seeing as a common thread from amongst all of you. Firoz, I know you've got a question that you're dying to ask, so I'll pass back over to you.
Thank you, and I'm really mindful of the time as well. We've so overrun, but I want to thank you all for still staying on, because I know these conversations can carry on, and they'd be really interesting in terms of insight. But look, I'm currently on a call from Geneva. I've just been visiting the UNHCR, and been having some very interesting conversations about impact investing. So my question to all of you, and perhaps one or two of you can answer this, but also it's a takeaway question for all of you really to think about. What role can private sector and private capital play in the development and impact of halal tourism, right? And perhaps
if you like, I can take the lead on that. So recently, the private sector I see is taking a bigger role globally. My recent visit to Bosnia, where the tourism industry invited us, and we saw private chains such as Swiss Hotel transforming its entire restaurant, its entire hotel facility into a complete halal friendly, meaning no alcohol within the facility. And that's being Swiss Hotel. Swiss Hotel is known as a five-star brand. Then going from Bosnia all the way to Australia, we were invited by the Four Seasons because they initiated a complete halal option with no pork in one of their restaurants within the hotel. And that is big. So these initiatives are really impacting and changing from the private sector. The government, I would say, if you would take an example, Singapore has really led that, and Malaysia, because they really have a strict policy in providing and ensuring a halal certification. But other than that, I think the private sector are really taking a big leap and impacting the global halal tourism market per se throughout the world. And the two leading examples I saw was one in Bosnia and one in Australia just in my recent visit this summer. And I was shocked and I was happy because they're accommodating to me and they're ensuring that, you know what, this hotel is a dry hotel. This hotel does not allow any alcohol, does not sell any alcohol, and also ensures a full halal option.
Especially coming from a country like Pakistan, just to add on, I think the private sector has a huge, huge role to play as far as promotion of the halal travel or just general travel is concerned. And I think another target audience that is very vital and important in the promotion of Muslim travel globally is every overseas Muslim that's living in an economy which isn't Muslim based. So say the people sitting in North America, the people sitting in Europe, the overseas Muslims sitting across the globe, I think they also become a part of the private sector, quote unquote, which can promote this sort of travel.
You know, Firoz, I think that's all we have time for.
Oh no, we're out of time. Okay, this is how it is, guys. So listen, first of all, thank you to all of our panelists today and to everyone that tuned in on the live webinar. We've got our next one in 2 weeks' time, so please do join us. This webinar has been recorded, so you can listen again or forward on. And we ask you to please include the hashtag #WorldExpo London.
Yeah, so some valuable insights and some key takeaways. And once again, we brought people closer together. And that's exactly what this series is designed to become. It's a strong community and platform of global and socially conscious entrepreneurs like yourselves from across the globe, impact and humanitarian focused investors, and obviously the effervescent personalities that make up many of tomorrow's startups.
So if you're an investor, startup founder, CEO with something to share, or policymaker that wants to get a better understanding of this space, then get in touch with us through LinkedIn and let's get you in the conversation with.
Great, thanks to all our panelists, and we'll see everyone else in 2 weeks' time on our next webinar. Details are on LinkedIn. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.